you're gonna be part of our show, unless you wanna go to the side. It's up to you.
No, you didn't clear that first.
All right. In the Texas Education Agency system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups. The trustees that hire the superintendent that manages the day-to-day operations of the district, and the district attorneys who prosecute both of them. These are their stories.
We are not attorneys, we just play them on TV.
President, what are you doing in my office?
I come to question the new professional photo I found on Facebook.
Look, I'm doing my job as your superintendent, okay? What I do in my spare time is none of your business. And look, just because they pulled me over and found a little bit of drugs in my car and they're accusing me of a DWI is not true. Regardless, you can't just walk into my office like that.
I come to address something because whenever you show up on Say Cheese and it's been shared 220 times, it is our business.
Am I not innocent until proven guilty? This has nothing to do with my job duties here.
It actually does. You represent the district. You are our official chief of the district and represent the community.
Well, President Angie, I think you might want to make it go away because you did call me to hire your daughter. I got her job. It's not my fault she'd like to sleep with the athletic director. So I think you just need to call this meeting off and go away.
You know, we're really not here to talk about my issue. We're here to talk about your wonderful new professional photo. And we have called an emergency meeting to discuss your contract.
Are you threatening me?
No threat here. We're going to discuss your contract and decide what we're going to do because we can't hire for costs.
It's obviously you haven't read the contract, and no matter for what reason you fire me, you better get ready to pay $1 million. You know, that's the reason I was here. You guys signed it. Whatever I do, I'm still going to get paid.
We will see you Tuesday evening in closed session.
And then, don't forget those little bags of cash from the contractors that wanted the bonds. Don't forget about that because you did get a brand new truck and you paid it off, didn't you?
Remember, cash isn't traceable.
Oh. You can leave now.
I'll see you Tuesday. Welcome,
Here.
everybody.
Welcome.
I first want to say congratulations and thank you for serving your community. It is a very well-paid job. You probably are already overwhelmed by the knowledge you've received, and here we are to give you more. I know as I sat through this 3 years ago, that I remembered nothing that was given to me. So just remember, it's okay to ask the questions and keep asking them, and ask the other board members that are on, and reach out to your fellow people. We will actually be here afterwards, so we're gonna have lunch with you and do different things as well. So, again, we're part of the Leadership LTASB class of 2026, and we actually graduate next Friday, so we're very excited. So we're gonna talk about superintendent contracts in Texas, as you can see, specifically negotiating them, executing them, and sustaining them. For new trustees, this is one of the most important votes you will ever take. A superintendent contract is much more than an employee agreement. It is a government's document that sets expectations for leadership, accountability, compensation, performance, and stability within the district. And when it's done well, it protects your district. When it's done poorly, it can cost you financially and politically. The decisions you make regarding a superintendent's contract can have long-term implications for your district's culture, finances, strategic direction, and public trust.
So I heard a couple of little gasps here because that made some people uncomfortable. Well, it should, because the reality is if you Google some of these things, you're going to find that and more. Okay? So why does this matter? It matters for those really important little things right there: district stability, fiscal responsibility, public trust, state oversight risk. Those are the high points. So let's talk about what this contract really is. This is a prenup. Anybody who's ever been married knows that when you walk into something, you believe it's going to be forever. But if you have something to lose, you do a prenup, right? You got to look at death, disability, and disasters, and divorce. Sometimes you're going to get into these agreements and they don't like you. Superintendents are employees, and I'm going to bring this from a perspective, both of us, James and I come from a different perspective, that when we read this and we studied this, we have the privilege of working inside government. I work inside Harris County, and we're professionals inside a political world. There's a huge distinction to that, because we as professionals have to look at our elected officials and say, do I really want to work for them? There's a reason why there's 89 vacancies of superintendents across the state of Texas, because we as trustees are being interviewed through our social media, through our interactions, through our board meetings. Would you work for yourself? Are you the image of success that someone was going to move their family and be at risk of getting fired within 2 years? So we have to look at ourselves and really look at the contract to make sure we know what we're getting ourselves into. Because it's the truth: death, disability, dismemberment, and also behavior. And that contract that we just drew out, well, the superintendent was in full control and knew, based on their contract, that no matter what they did, they're going to get paid. Right? So we got to make sure that we understand that the superintendent contracts are critical to protect the school district, their finances, right? And at the end of the day, the students. But not just the end of the day, at the beginning of the day. Everything we do is about the students and the teachers and the taxpayers. So we have to protect them all.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about the Texas legal framework. Texas law gives school boards significant authority to govern their districts, but that authority exists within a carefully defined legal framework. Board members must understand not only the powers granted to them, but also the limits imposed by state law. For example, the Texas Education Code, section 11.02201, establishes the superintendent as the district's chief executive officer and outlines the board's authority to employ a superintendent. However, a statute also limits the superintendent contracts to a maximum term of 5 years. A board may negotiate the contract terms and renewals, but it cannot exceed the boundaries established by law. Similarly, the Chapter 21, the Texas Education Code, governs employment contracts, resignations, and terminations. Boards cannot simply end a superintendent's contract because of a disagreement or change in priorities. Contract provisions, due process requirements, and statutory procedures must be followed carefully to avoid legal challenges and financial liability. Financial settlements also subject to public accountability requirements. The Texas Local Government Code requires public disclosure and, in certain circumstances, public hearings before approving severance agreements involving public funds. These provisions reflect the legislature's expectation that taxpayers have visibility into significant expenditures made by their elected officials. More recently, the House Bill 762 added another layer of oversight by placing limits on severance payments for public employees. These restrictions narrow the discretion that boards may have previously exercised with negotiation, separation agreements, and reinforce the principle that public funds must be used responsibly and transparently. So board members should also remember that local governance exists within a broader accountability system. Under Chapter 39A of the Texas Education Code, the Texas Education Agency has authority to intervene when serious governance or performance failures occur. When boards operate within the authority granted by law, they protect the district, safeguard the taxpayers' resources, and reduce the legal risk and preserve the public trust.
And now we're going to hear from one of our members who wasn't able to be here about negotiating contracts.
Congratulations, trustees. I hope you're enjoying the Texas Trustee Institute. My name is Denisha Williams. I am the school board trustee here at Cedar Hill ISD. My colleagues, Angie and Jose, have just laid the framework of what makes contracts very important for us as board members. I'm going to go over negotiating contracts. Not all superintendent contracts look the same, and that difference matters more than most new trustees realize. You'll generally encounter three types: fixed-term contracts, rolling or evergreen contracts, and hybrid models. A fixed-term contract has a clear start and end date. A rolling contract automatically extends, often by a year, unless the board takes action. And hybrids blend elements of both. Each structure comes with different levels of financial exposure and accountability. Rolling contracts can feel like a stability tool, and sometimes they are, but they can also quietly extend a district's liability year after year without the board intentionally deciding to do so. So the question every trustee should be asking before that vote is, which structure best serves both stability and accountability for our community? Because those two things have to live together. Now this is where it gets real. Termination language, servants formulas, mitigation clauses. This is the section of the contract that either protects your district or exposes it. Let me make it concrete. If a superintendent signs a 5-year contract and leaves in year 2, what does that actually cost your district and your taxpayers? Here's the honest truth. Many boards haven't done that math before approving the agreement. And by the time you need to, it's too late to renegotiate. Mitigation clauses matter. They require the departing superintendent to seek other employment, which can reduce what the district ultimately pays. Without them, your exposure is wide open. This is exactly why risk modeling has to happen before the vote, not after. My colleague, Mary, is going to walk you through what this looks like in practice.
Yes, so for the new trustees, this is one of the most important votes you'll ever take. As trustees, we don't hire many employees, we hire one. And that one contract impacts everything. So before voting on a contract, trustees should ask these hard questions here. What happens if the superintendent leaves in 2 years or the year 2? What is the total payout if terminated without cause? Does the contract include a mitigation requirement? Is severance capped under current law? And how would this decision look publicly? So contracts should be evaluated for both legal defensibility and public accountability. So when it's done poorly though, it can cost you financially and politically, and that is ultimately why this matters.
All right, so up to this point, we've really talked about the superintendent's contracts from a policy and governance perspective. The structure, the clauses, the legal frameworks and financial exposure that boards have to think about before they actually vote for their superintendent. Now, on paper, a lot of these contracts, they look completely reasonable. A 3-year term may seem standard. Severance clause may appear fair at first glance. They do not raise any alarms. But what we want to do next is take it out of theory and put it into the real world. And what the actual challenges that governance presents, the leadership conflicts, the contract language when it collides with the real world. Because in reality, most districts do not start in a crisis. It's the small things that get you there. It's going to be a contract extension there, a buyout negotiation here, a divided board, input from the community. So over time, these issues, they tend to snowball. And that's where we start looking at some real world cases from the state of Texas. So the first one we have is going to be Harlingen CISD. Now this case is interesting because legally, there was nothing the district did wrong. Nothing here was outside of the norm. But publicly, it became much more complicated. The superintendent was hired on a 3-year contract and received a salary increase right before resigning, roughly about a year later. Eventually, the district entered into a separation agreement for around $250,000, $250,000. Now, from the board's perspective, their position was essentially negotiating between something bad and something worse, which could have been potentially over $1 million per the remaining superintendent's contract. Now, it's important to point out that sometimes boards, a decision between something bad and something worse. The buyout was actually to reduce the long-term exposure. But here is where governance and public perception starts to intersect. From the community standpoint, people often start asking the questions, why are we paying this money? What did we do wrong? Who do we point the finger at? Could this have been stopped or caught early on? Why is the superintendent leaving so early? Was this avoidable? It's decisions like this that really bring to point the relationships between the board and the superintendent. Things that you have to start thinking about is going to be the salary, the benefits, the severance pay, the timeline. All of these things have to come into account. It's one practical question trustees always have to ask before starting or voting on the superintendent contract. If the relationship ends early, can we clearly explain the financial outcome to the public? Because eventually, there's a good chance you may have to, as you mentioned earlier.
Hey, I'm here to present the next couple of cases. In this case, Fort Worth ISD. I hope you forgive me. It's a detail. These cases have lots of details that are important, so I'm going to refer to my notes here and there. You probably are well aware of what's going on in Fort Worth. A new superintendent was hired while the district was under heavy public and state scrutiny for failing campuses. But what followed on was a public outcry in the environment because there were significant teacher and staff job cuts that took place as well, and public allegations of administrative misconduct, including employees who were also raising questions in a very public manner. And the public was concerned because there were ever-changing narratives about the district finances. Board members had negotiated a long-term contract with 1-year extensions plus potential annual performance bonuses. Perhaps this was in recognition of the history of leadership turnover in this district and the difficult environment that they knew this trustee was coming into. However, ultimately, the lack of accountability to the public by this board and board disagreements over rushed compensation decisions and superintendent performance resulted in a separation agreement that exceeded $500,000. All this in the background with public concern of all orders by both parents, families, and employees within the district. Again, as in the previous case, trustees should consider, if this relationship ends early, can we clearly explain the financial outcomes to the public? Under the Texas Education Code 39A, which we've talked about, TEA justified a takeover of this district given the continuing poor progress in fixing academic achievement and the outcome with more potential financial and administrative improprieties surfaced. The takeaway: leadership instability plus financial exposure plus accountability issues will increase the potential of state intervention. Now moving on to our next case study here in Lancaster. Lancaster ISD may be the clearest example of governance breakdown. The board extended the superintendent's contract, nothing unusual there. It just happened 11 days after just before approving a $2 million separation agreement in the middle of the pandemic. Think about how that went over the public. Additionally, the vote was taken in executive session, not an open session as per Open Meeting Act. Details of the board's deliberations were not made public, leading to questions of transparency. On top of this, the resignation and separation agreement could have cost the district up to $4 million in severance and potential state penalties. A judge later blocked this buyout decision based on the financial risk to the school district. Following on, TEA found that this buyout plan had violated the Texas Education Code, Section 45105, and the Texas Constitution, Article 3. Additional controversy came up with other governance disputes, including reprimands and bans on board members for conduct issues. So this is a hot mess. The TEA appointed a conservatorship. So that we're not talking just about financial risk to the district and our taxpayers, our community, but loss of local control. Process matters, transparency matters, timing matters. The takeaway on this: process failures and contract structures can trigger a loss of control. I'm going to do a rogue thing here, and I'm going to just say something for me personally. When we are elected as school board trustees, that means our community has placed their trust in us to do the best for their kids and for our community. So that means they have handed you over local control. That is what you are guarding by being trustees, the ability to make the right decisions for your kids and your community. So if you risk that local control being taken away from you, that is the worst thing you can do as a trustee. That's why this is important.
Thank you so much. Now, we went through the meat and potatoes of the hard stuff, right? But now let's talk about real world issues. Life, your day-to-day going in there, and why we actually did this. Okay, because a lot of us ran, and some of us had agendas. Let's just be real about it. You didn't like the super, you didn't like something, you didn't like somebody, maybe kid, not given the opportunity to walk the stage because they were held accountable for their actions, and so we ran. Those are real issues that happened. That's why some of y'all ran. Some of us ran. Well, we just don't like them because they're a man, they're a woman, they're black, they're white, they're purple, they're yellow. It doesn't matter. You have an agenda. We have an agenda. None of us just woke up one day and said, let me go spend money to run for a free office. Right? So let's just be real about it. But let's talk about how this works. There are employees, they're working, they're professionals, they have to protect themselves from us. 7 personalities, 7 egos, 7 behaviors. And that contract protects them, but We have contract extensions that have to change every time session happens. Every 2 years, something changes. TA, the state, public education is under attack. Let's just be real about it. So our contract will be updated. They have their lawyer, we have ours. We should have ours. If you have the same lawyer, you might want to think twice about that. 2 separate lawyers, not on the same team. Leadership conflict, boards split over agendas. Are you part of that flip? Are you part of the agenda? What image are you going to give publicly? Can your image as a trustee, a board of trustees, recruit good quality superintendents? Would you work for you and your behavior? Buyout agreements, they're changing. They're legally going to change every 2 years. Make sure you understand them. Make sure you understand what the causes are. Understand how they can defend themselves from your accusations or behavior. Public scrutiny. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's going to look good. We've all been there. Ethics and legality are not the same thing. Our community would tear us up if they see $1 million payout when we can't afford to upgrade the baseball fields. Legal challenges. Understand that if you don't take the initiative or you have an attorney who's not on their game and they don't upgrade your contract, you're going to be challenged. TA will win. State law trumps everything. And at the end of the day, TA intervention. Yes, grades is one of them, but our behavior is also another reason why TA comes in and takes us over. We have to make sure that we as trustees are constantly operating legally and ethically. Okay? Yes, we understand that we don't get paid for this, but we need to stay clear from those contractors and influencing contracts or cooperatives out there. Do not put your superintendent in an awkward position. Protect your superintendent. You truly have to be a team of 8.
All right, so when you start looking at superintendent contracts across the state, you'll begin to see some stories that repeat themselves. One of the most common patterns is superintendents leaving after only just a few years or even less. And the district ends up paying a substantial settlement. This can be frustrating to not only taxpayers, but to the teachers and staff of the district and the community who expected long-term leadership. Another issue is that contract language itself. But honestly, it's not the contracts itself. It's going to be the relationship breakdown between the board and the superintendent. When boards become divided, the expectations are not clear, or the governance starts to drift. Those tensions tend to eventually lead to costly departures. Communication also plays a huge role. When communication slows down, trust begins to erode between the board and the superintendent, or the board and the ELT. It becomes one of those bigger cases. It becomes a snowball. When instability becomes public, that again, when it starts to attract the attention of TEA. And one of the other things that could attract the TEA I wanted to add to is going to be the finances of the district as well. Will always bring TEA. The takeaway is that superintendent's contract isn't just a legal document that sits in the file cabinet. It's part of the larger governance relationship between the board and the superintendent. Strong contracts matter, but strong communications and clear expectations also matter just as much. These aren't isolated incidents that we've shown you. They are systematic governance lessons. And with that, we're going to switch to number 3.
We're going to talk about sustaining and balancing. Whenever we talk about this, strong districts don't just negotiate contracts, that they sustain them. Whenever we talk about this, it's not just a once-a-year deal. We all know that we have to vote on this once a year. However, this should be a continuing thing. The most effective school boards understand that sustaining contracts are ongoing. One of the most important tools is to understand that the separation between deliberate consideration of the contract extensions. You don't necessarily just go in and vote for another extension. You want to decide, is this the right person for our district? Is he going in the right direction? I know my first year on the board, I was on the board 6 months, and we went in and we did a new superintendent evaluation, and we did not do an extension. And you know what she did next week? She resigned. And so that sets the precedence of what that superintendent's gonna do. And so you really have to look at that and what you want to sustain for your district and the public presence as well. Whenever you're looking at this as well, you want to make sure that there are a couple of things in that contract. You want to make sure that there is, the severance caps should be clearly defined, mitigation clauses. Sorry, I forgot to press the button. Separate clauses should be capped and clearly defined. Mitigation clauses are essential, and there should be defined leave limits, like vacation, personal leave, anything else that you decide to add, such as if you're going to add extra money to their TRS or different things like that. There should also be no automatic contract extensions. I know some districts automatically have a contract extension, or some districts they're automatically going to get a raise every year. You really want to look at that, and everybody, before you do your contract, you really want to talk with your attorney, because that attorney is really going to help you and make sure that you're in the legal parameters and that you're following the guidelines, because you don't want to get yourself in a pickle. All these safeguards help reduce the likelihood of disputes and misunderstandings. They produce accountability, transparency. They also help ensure that decisions are made in the best interest of students, staff, taxpayers, and the board, because in the end, structure protects stability. When expectations are clear, responsibilities are defined, and accountability and mechanisms are built into the contract, boards are better positioned to support effective leadership and maintain public trust and ensure long-term district success. I kind of didn't skip through, sorry.
Now we're going to look at what will happen with a good contract.
I feel like I should do a top show.
President, how are you? I think I know why you're coming. Look, I just got off the phone with my attorney, and I'm sure you're aware of my incident this week. Look, I'm innocent. I borrowed my son's car. Unfortunately, there were things in there that don't belong to me, but they're accusing me of driving under the influence, and I'll deal with that separately. But above everything else, I know that I'm embarrassed the district. It's in my contract. My attorney already let me know the consequences for just being arrested and bringing a bad light to the district. So I'm fully aware you're going to have to put me on administrative leave until this is completed, but more than likely it's probably going to end our relationship or cause. And I want to apologize for that behavior. It shouldn't have ever happened, but I am innocent. I truly believe I'm innocent, but I also understand that this has brought a bad name to the district.
And I appreciate that, and I respect that, and we can discuss this later.
But before you leave, I want to thank you for allowing me to also guide our relationship. Right? There's been moments when you've come to me with things that I've had to tell you no, that you just didn't know, right? And you were able to stay in your lane, as they say, and work ethically, and you got a second opinion. And when we had to call the attorneys, we called the attorneys. But thank you for never crossing that line with me. Thank you for always staying in your lane. And I know I crossed the line with the district, and I've embarrassed the students. But I want to thank you and the other trustees for never overstepping or getting into situations that you shouldn't have. So I apologize, and hopefully we get through this, and hopefully you're going to find out that I am truly innocent, but I've embarrassed the district. So I thank you for coming and visiting, and I understand I have to leave, and we'll follow that process.
Thank you.
Different conversation, right? As an employee, anybody, who's an employee here? Raise your hand as an employee. All right, we know the consequences of our actions. And as an employer, also having owned my own business, there's moments where we forget what being an employee is. And how we have to manage employees, right? I want to take a moment right now that, as you know, there's 2 years out there. The average tenure for a superintendent is 2 years. Would you work for a place for 2 years consistently? Would you constantly move your family to a different spot of Texas every 2 years because the trustees were so unstable? Because remember, we as employees, we work for someone. And we usually don't quit the job, we quit the boss. So we have to take full ownership of the behavior of our superintendents. Are we a group, a district that values longevity, talent, skill, gives them the opportunity to do a good job, and supports them to grow? Are we employers that allow them to grow, but at the same time be held accountable for their actions? Like 80-20 rule, as we all know, right? 80% of the superintendents want to do a great job. There might be 20% that don't. I would probably say it's more like 2%, 80-92%, because no one's going to get themselves into a situation, spend that much time to get a master's, a doctorate, and get all these certifications to get fired in 2 years. So we have to value those superintendents. Now, I am so privileged to say that I come from a district right now that our superintendent is starting his 36th year of continuous service to the district and is starting his 7th year as superintendent. And that's not because, he is truly a wonderful man. I love him to death. We become friends, but we also are real clear of our relationship. We know we might hang out together once in a while, but when it comes to business, it's business. When it comes to contracts, it's contracts. And we stay in our lane and we guide ourselves properly to make sure that we are leading for the kids. Right? So to close this out, governance commitments, and we'll open up for questions. Above everything else, it's about the children. It's about the students. It's about creating an environment that parents want to bring their kids. If we're having conflict publicly, would you, just as a parent, if you see your school board fighting publicly, would you take your kid to that school district, or will you choose somebody else? Well, same mentality for a superintendent. If you have a vacancy and I'm watching your school board meetings because they're all public, would I want to go work for you? Do I like your attitude? Second, taxpayers. Our taxpayers know what's going on. They know their taxes are going up and productivity isn't there. If we don't communicate properly as a team, or we're fighting with our superintendent, they're not going to want to support us. And last but not least, local control. If we continue to have conflict, if we do not manage our employee properly with support and partnership and training, we are going to lose local control. Based on our current elected officials at the state level, they have no problem taking over school districts for anything. All right, so we have to make sure that you protect your school district, you protect your superintendent, and above all else, protect the children. Thank you so much for your attention, and now we'll open up for questions.
Team Delta did a phenomenal job. Any questions? I see one at table 18.
They let me keep the microphone.
Hello, my name is Lakeisha Small, and I'm from Manor ISD. Regarding the topic of the different types of contracts, you mentioned the rolling contract. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that? And then also, is it limited to the statutory of the 5 years?
That's actually from what we read. Denisha's the one that mastered it, but from what we read, this is one of the latest updates for the state legislature, that we had to remove that automatic renewal clause. So what we have to do is every time the renewal clause, we have to make it a board item to renew the contract independently. That's how we understood it. That's actually how we just processed our last renewal with our superintendent. So it's meant to limit the payout clauses because it's a 1-year contract per se, but we can do 3 years or up to 5. Lawyers are giving different guidance, but the biggest thing that I learned from our lawyers is that we are the decision makers. They are the ones to provide us legal opinions, not operational guidance. So I hope we understand that distinction, but yes, it can no longer just be an automatic, I get it. It has to be up for a full vote.
And I know, like, we're coming up with ours, And so he has a 3-year contract, but we always vote to extend it 1 year. So that just, you can always vote to extend it 1 year. We will never do more than 3 years at a time, just because that's what our attorney has advised us on.
I want to jump in on that, Angie. So there is a part of the hidden curriculum on the superintendent side. There is an unspoken rule that if they've been there and they're on a 2-year or 3-year contract and they're up for evaluation, if that doesn't happen when that year's extended, that is an internal sign to them that it's time to go. So I want you to caution that. Not a lot of people know that rule. Like that's, but to superintendents that say they didn't extend my contract, like they must be saying something but not saying something. So just keep that in mind.
And that's what we had happen, is we decided not to extend the contract, and that's when she said, I'm going.
So Dr. Long, just a question. With the new superintendent contract, would that same mentality be in play if it would not, it'd stay, if it changed?
No, Jeff, like clear as kind. TEA is, and the governor, quite frankly, is paying really close attention to superintendent contracts. They're also paying really close attention to compensation packages. There's actually a task force now that's going to be coming online looking at that. In the past, districts would pay some superintendents just to move it along, right? And in the past, some superintendents, attorneys have become very savvy in hiding those pieces in the contract, but I do agree with Jose is it's really critical for boards to have their own counsel separate from the admin council. Admin council is to support and protect the district. The board council is to protect you as volunteers, as fiduciary holders that have been entrusted with fiduciary responsibility in the way of taxpayer funds and taxpayer resources, mainly meaning human capital.
I just want to add to that, you can look at pretty much any districts across the Texas and you can find an example of a superintendent contract. I know you can look at Greenville ISD and you will see his first contract as well as an extension, and then you will see another one coming up at the end of June with an additional one.
No question, I'm sorry.
Raymond Robinson with Car City Independent School District. Is the provision still in law that when you buy out those superintendent contracts, that state funding is reduced by a portion or some amount thereafter whenever, that there was some legislation that came out, it wasn't in the 89th, I think it was the 88th or maybe.
Can you jot that on the post-it and we'll put it on the parking lot, and when our attorneys come back, I'll make sure they get that answer for you.
That's the first, and that's a pay grade.
There was, but then there was a commissioner's ruling, and there's two, and I'm not sure which one, so I'm gonna wait for when Joy comes back. So if you jot it down, we'll put it in the parking lot, because they have the best updates.
I'm just gonna say, as a small note, I've heard of that, and in the cases that we were discussing, particularly in Lancaster's case, that was a situation where they were gonna, it was such a huge, potential payout, $4 million, that was gonna have impact on their, what it's called the foundation fund, which supports your schools, your district. So, but yeah, could get legal. And I'm also gonna add, when you're talking about doing merit evaluations, make it very clear, make it policy, make it understood among your board members, that when you're doing that performance review is not something that you should be blown off. It is directly tied to that contract and their compensation. It should be clear to them. It should be clear to you as trustees. It should be clear to your public. And they should be able to see that evaluation on your agenda. It is a closed session item because, we're talking about personal stuff here that's not an open. But make sure that you have, and there's lots of classes that you can take with LTASB that talk about
superintendent evaluation, to make sure that that is a clear part of your process, that your contract and transparency in your community will be known.
I would like to echo that point and question at table 6. Instead of when people talk about getting in the weeds, we talked about this yesterday, instead of like trying to get on a campus, instead of trying to see what a teacher is doing or what a coach is doing, spend time understanding that evaluation and the contract, because that's where your power is. In holding them accountable for metrics that you decide. Right? So instead of you worrying about that one campus, what's happening on 3 campuses, that if you put a criterion in place in an evaluation, remember, you authorize, but you monitor. And then you say, I want to report to see how you have, or what progress you're making towards this metric.
You fly the plane, never land.
Jamie Owens Gonzalez, ISD. My understanding is that the contract is available to anybody who wants to see it. Evaluation is not. Mine was extended before I was brought in, and so I asked to see it. And there were 2 provisions in there that was noted per the previous, they were clauses that I assumed her attorney added to say, pay my TRS because you paid the last one's TRS, and I don't remember paying for unused vacation days. Is there a way, those are precedents that, is there a way to, I guess they could have just not included that? Is that, are we setting our districts up so that the next one is always higher than the previous one? And
The superintendent contract is the most unique contract of any contract in Texas public schools. It's unusual from a principal, from a teacher, from any of your 187 contracts. So anything can be written into the superintendent contract. I've seen superintendent contracts where they pay for moving fees, where they pay for vehicle maintenance, where they pay for laptop, like every 3 years they get a new laptop. Every 2 years they get a new cell phone. You can pay into their retirement. You can do anything with it, which is why what this team is sharing is so critically important for you to understand what the parameters are, and while folks like Texas Scorecard and other organizations are really looking at how boards are contracting superintendents and holding them accountable. So yes, they can do any of that. And that's why their point about having 2 attorneys, one for the board and one for the admin, is also critically important to make sure that you're not getting your district financially, you're putting them in a compromising position to try to pay this person out, because it will come from your foundation funds or your basic allotment funds.
Okay, so I want to understand.
Name, district, microphone.
Okay, Joyce Lindman in Stafford, MSD. My question is, okay, we just hired a superintendent, right?
We have somebody on leadership LTASB.
Yes, that's my mentor, Baptiste, yes. Okay, so we just hired a superintendent. I wasn't a part of that. I came in after. However, is there not a way when you're negotiating his or her contract to put in kind of like MBA contracts, right? If you quit before 5 years, you get nothing. But if you stay within this time frame, you only get this amount of money or benefits. But if you don't, then you walk away with nothing.
That's a great question, and the answer is you can do anything with the contract. The point is, will they accept it? Will they actually come work for you? You gotta be attractive for the superintendent too, because this could be their last job ever. Think about it. They come in good faith, they believe in you, but they walk into a financial disaster. They walk in and they're financially insolvent, they're having to close the district down because they have $500 to bank. Right? So they gotta do their homework on you.
only thing that I was gonna add to that is, and I think Dr. Long mentioned it earlier, it's, even though it's not written, it's kind of what's unsaid. And so if you do provide a contract that says after 3 years, after 5 years, you don't get anything, what does that really say about the trust with the board of the new oncoming superintendent? So that's the only other thing I wanted to add.
And if you, whenever you do the contract, you'll also have board goals. And part of those board goals, are part of the evaluation. And so that's part of all the bigger picture and everything.
All right, with that, I think we are out of time. So thank you guys so much for coming, giving us your attention. And again, we'll be there at lunch if you have any additional questions.